I got voted by most of the old ladies and staff who were professors, and they will tell you they were old ladies, didn't want me in because I didn't have my baccalaureate in fine arts. But there were people who pushed for me, and I got in. And it was a very interesting 2-year journey. They don't teach you any skills. It's all very theoretical, and how to present your work and how to talk about your work, et cetera, et cetera. But it was a really wonderful ride. I learned an awful lot, and I continue to increase my skill set. So that's how I come here with this work. It is based on the concept that when we face tremendous odds and tremendous bad things, and our minds work very differently. And I think it was 2018 when I was trying to think about my thesis, because you have to write a thesis for an MFA, it's a terminal degree. I was reading Time magazine, and they interviewed all these people who had lost their children to gunmen, all the parents who had survived the children being slaughtered. And they all said the same thing, that their first reaction when they heard that the child had died was like a balloon with a string being cut, and then everything went white. They couldn't see, they couldn't hear, they couldn't function. And then after that stage was gone, and they kind of were semi-mobile, they lived in a very fractured world. They would get up in the morning to make their child their breakfast, but there was no child. They would go to the bus stop to pick up their child, but there was no child. And they lived with this fracturing for years and years and years, and they were very embarrassed about it because their functionality was not very good. And I'm sure all you that have had losses in your life have experienced this to some point or another. So this concept of fracturing and this concept of dealing with how your mind changes when you deal with a death of a loved one or your impending death is pretty universal. They've studied this after the Holocaust, psychiatrists have studied it, and they found that people go through the same thing, no matter what their culture, no matter what their background, no matter what their education. There's a period of blankness, and then there's a period of being very fractured, and then there's a period of healing where you incorporate that fracturing into a new way of being. So the work you're going to see out there is based on fracturing. When I was in the pandemic, I was living in Portland. I was taking classes at USSM to increase my tools in my tool chest, and all of a sudden that was gone. And I was living with a very elderly and aged dog that had to be walked. And I'd walk out to the street with my mask on and my whole thing, and people would be smoking. And I could see, or they would be vaping, and I could see the vapor smoke come across the street, and I could smell through my mask. Well, having been a nurse, I was going holy S-H-I-T, and I was very, very frightened. But I wasn't in the blank stage because it wasn't like I was dying right now. It was more the frightening stage of my possible impending death. So the first piece you'll see as you go into the hallway is my first piece I made. I made it in 5 pieces of wood, and one side, I think it's called the Expendables, which is all the old ladies who look like they're very ill. And the other side is the May 23rd New York Times article on the 100,000 deaths of May 23rd, 2020. And it has become a very famous article because they listed all the people, and they listed what they were and who they were. And that article, if you look it up on your phone or your computer, you can read many people talking about how important it was because it humanized the death toll. It wasn't just we lost, these number of people. It was Joe Smith and Marianne so-and-so, very common people and very famous people who had died. And that's when I decided to do some work. And thank goodness I have my own Zoom group, quick group that we've made. We're all artists who are in different stages. And every 2 weeks, we have to make a piece of work to talk about. And nobody wants to be embarrassed and not have something to show. So all this work that you'll see is all from last year. It is my fracturing, my trying to get a handle on it, and kind of knowing too much. Because in February, when I read about this virus coming, and all the parents, which I understand completely, running to Europe to get their kids out of Europe, all I could say is, SHIT, this is going to spread like wildfire. Because they're bringing it back, and no one really knew how much it would spread. And at that time, we had leadership that wasn't going to mandate masks or whatever. And we didn't know exactly how it was spread. We figured it was spread respiratory-wise, how much touching-wise, we weren't sure. But I knew we were in trouble. And that's the downside of being in the medical profession, or having a brain. All of you have taken biology. All of you probably figured it out a long time ago. You know, everybody who has any common sense can read the basic science and know if you breathe on somebody and you got something, or you're smoking and coughing, you're going to spread it. But somehow our whole universe didn't catch up on that. So in January, when the vaccine, this year when the vaccine became more available to us people who were 70 and older, I dragged Fred up to Presque Isle. I said, we're going on a trip. And the only way I could get 2 shots together through Northern Lights was to go to Presque Isle, because the time you got one person's name in, you couldn't get the second person's name in, and they were wonderful. So we had our trip out of the state, not out of the state, but out of town to Presque Isle. We looked out with the weather, and we got vaccinated. But I don't think it's over yet. Hopefully we're on the cusp that it will be over. But I think we will all have to remember that it can happen again, and rejoice with each other. And for me, it was just a way of making work that was meaningful for me. I have a website, it's mildredbachrach.com, so it's not very difficult to find. And the first series I made when I was in grad school was called Women's Ills. And I kind of wanted to memorialize all the women I saw as a public health nurse in Central Maine who were glued to their families and put up with derogatory remarks like wound too tight, or, I pick it out of my brains, hanging from a thread, or bogged down. And there are soft sculptures on that site you can look at that to memorialize the women who, you know, took care of all the kids and worked or didn't work and really glued the families together. So I am now what we call scrubbing the studio. When you make a series of work as an artist, at least for me, I need to show it and put it away so I can make a new series. I already have a new series in mind. I have endless series in mind. That's one of the problems of being an artist. You always have something in your mind. You always are thinking about what you want to do next. But this work was shown virtually by the Jewish Museum, and it was shown partially in person at the LA Arts Gallery in Lewiston, Maine. And it was mentioned, had 2 articles on it from the Maine Arts Journal. So it has gotten some press, or what do you want to call it, accolades. It may be the pinnacle of my career. I have no idea. But I appreciate you letting me scrubbing in the studio and showing it to you in person, because they've never been able to be seen all together, only online, which is one image at a time. And I wanted to show you my reaction to the pandemic, the fracturing that I felt, the ode to the people who died. And then I have one group, it's called Hope, Faith, and Charity, which I figured out last night was the same saying as my Georgetown cat, which was Hope, Faith, and Charity, that I did in between because I couldn't stand making another fractured piece in terms of being depressed. And there is a piece there called Are We There Yet? And I think we are almost there yet, but it's coming. Thank you for your time.